This is Calicatster, and just got over a hideous cold through the birthday week. It is now the week after that, and it is currently on the sets of the church Christmas play, which started final production and re-releasing on the weekend. So we're back in action. It's toward the end of the we over and compiled stuff. Essentially looked over two different things: grandmother's novel Blessings Deferred, and it's not really a TV station. There's no point. But they've kicked around the idea of a Blessings Deferred thing, a Grandma Nap thing, for years and years and years. The original concept for that started in around when I was 18 or 19. It was at a birthday party, and Grandma Nap had said that she'd written a novel. This is before I had written any novels. Now I have 30 books on Amazon Kindle. I think they call it something else now. Amazon Scribe, I think is what it's called now. But it's still Kindle. I have books. And one of them is hers. The Grandma book republished as Blessings in Michigan, to avoid the other version of the story. The other. So the history of that was that in the 2000s, around 2003 or 4 or so, before the return to San Jose State for the second degree, when we decided to compile and create the Grandma's book posthumously. The original was Grandma Nap's book, was done in the 50s. There was a 50s version and there was a 70s version. And in the first 7 San Jose State years, 2 or 3 of the short stories we tried to get published, she never managed to publish. She was always going to Vanity Press, never managed to publish. Her stuff was Vanity Press places and other press places. It's not racy enough. There's nothing racy enough in it, so or it wasn't kitschy enough for them. Reader's Digest would have been okay with it, but apparently they didn't want it either. It wasn't until the 2000s that back when I was 19 in 1980 and 1990 or so, promised Grandma Nap that I would get her book published, to which she said, "I have no doubt you'll do that someday." She passed away at almost 100 years old in 1996. So, that never happened in her lifetime. But by 2003, there was some interest in that stuff, because new millennium, new century, and people were interested in stuff from the previous century. And the book was from the previous century. This place called Author House. They were a vanity press, basically. So we put together and compiled it, honed typing skills and so forth, and proofed and edited it with the surviving members of the cast and family and them, and we put together a Grandma's novel, Blessings Deferred. That's the name of it. I'm assuming that the title is basically a nod to religious allegory in that time period. In Greenville, Michigan, and not the other Greenville that's in Arkansas. It's in Greenville, Michigan. That's where the book originally, the 1970 reprint started, 73 reprint. The other versions of the book were out there. We broke out from Author House in 2007 or 8, somewhere around there, during the journalism years. But ever since then, and then we put up a Kindle version. We had to change the name to a sort of a pseudo sequel of Blessings in Michigan, even though it's Blessings in Greenville, even though it's still the same book. Just some added short stories on the end that were already in there, but they added the short stories. So naturally, I didn't need to repeat those short stories in here. There was no reason to do that in a movie version. So we have, So no Author House. Went over to Amazon. Author House turned out to be kind of iffy legally for them to be doing that. But they apparently gave the rights of the ISBN to random scammers. So now and then we get weird phone calls from people wanting to allegedly promote or publish a book that has been out of print since 2008. And Grandma's book, oh, your book is... And the scammers jacked up the price of the book even though it's out of print. I don't know how they managed to do that, but eventually it got to Amazon and they took it out of print completely and said, no, there aren't any printings left of this. There are in existence about 8 copies of the book. It's kind of, yeah, at this point we have them. Yeah, so we're not really putting those out, that original, at any point or any price. But if there's that much interested with these spammers, why not do something more with the concept? Kind of like Reading Rainbow a little bit. Oh, with action figures? But something like that, where it's like story time kind of thing. Mother Goose rhymes and things or whatever. The easiest way to do that, instead of doing a Spielbergian adventure with everyone playing the younger versions of them, that's kind of impossible. How about it's like it's like the 1930s and they're having the reunion and they're discussing the stories that took place over the last 60 years before that. There's your story. There's your hook. So there's your premise. Graham and Knapp had gone on to become semi-famous, chocolate circuits and all that, gone on to Chicago, had 2 kids, and all that, and gave that up to raise a family and everything, and then gone into, and then came out here in the 70s, but after Eugene died, Grandpa died, Grandpa Brown, and then she remarried somebody named Carl Knapp, and he died, so eventually by 71. She came out here, so yeah. I remember there was a couple of the stories that the 90s generation, our generation, didn't get at all. We tried to put them in Reed Magazine in San Jose State, Mark Scartz and I, and John Yeager. And they didn't get them at all. They're like, why would we want to print this thing about drunk chickens? I don't get it. They didn't get the context of that. There was this story called about drunk chickens. You see, they kind of had to explain that a little bit in order to set up the story, because it was Prohibition. It was Prohibition, and everybody was a teetotaler in Michigan, and she was a temperance person. Grandma Knapp's mother was a temperance person. Grandma Knapp was a teenager when this happened, and or a preteen perhaps, and the premise of this little short story was that she gave this spoiled elderberry juice to the chickens, and they acted crazy, and she didn't know what was going on, and acted goofy. The guy came by and said, well, you fermented it, you made elderberry wine out of it. And see, the gag is a setup where it is that true story, but it's a setup. And yeah, the joke is the chickens were drunk, and she's a temperance leader, which makes that funny. I'm mortified. I got my chickens drunk. She goes, yeah. So yeah, stuff like that. Another one where one of them tries to raise bees, and I guess that went over all right. I don't know, but yeah, I do. There was a reference to a jumbo sled story. Poplar Palace was a house. Yeah, so it was more fun reading about the oddities of this story that were in the story, but we didn't realize how odd they were, and they're no longer in the story. So I can mention the scenes that were a little odd. The beginning part that was fictionalized, where there's sort of like the great grandparents. It was all a list of characters when we wrote it, and so the scene didn't actually happen like this. But yeah, the Grandma's ancestors were coming out to Greenville. In the movie version, you don't need that, so all the stuff about Lucinda's namesake dying, and then Estelle's namesake later, sister dying in Greenville, doesn't need to be in there. Well, because it's addressed later in the story, in the short stories, as would follow the novel. Also, there were some oddities with this version. Doesn't have the oddities that were added about the apple tree and all that. That's not in there. It wasn't in. It was taken out of this version. This is a 2018 rewrite version. It doesn't include that, but it did include the Indian stuff, the Native American stuff. We can't include that, but we shouldn't. Yeah. Yeah, because it's not about that. By the time they went to Greenville, Michigan, they had chased all of them out of that area. They weren't in that area, and it is funny that that some of the characters that were mentioned were actually famous Indian characters. Like there was and tribes. There was the Ojibwe tribe was mentioned. The Lakota, the Ojibwe tribe. Chief Rin in the Face was a character. He was mentioned. He would have been famous in the Battle of Custer's Last Stand. One of the chiefs in the Custer's Last Stand story. So, an actual historical character appeared in the thing. But we don't know for sure whether that guy, when he was a younger person, whether the chief guy, referring to later on, was the official guy, or whether it was somebody just given that name in honor of the Custer guy. So we don't know. So it was confusing. So I was like, we don't need that anyway. So we'll cut that out. We'll also cut out mentioning Indian tribes, that actually Native American First Nation tribes. You don't need that. It's not about that. It's really not about that. That wasn't a main story. She wasn't trying to be offensive. In the same way that, some of my early stuff, in my early stuff, I would include peoples and names and races and ideas in my stories, not realizing, I was young and I didn't realize, hey, this isn't cool. It's in PC. I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to go there with that. When the Estelle Knapp's little older brothers are playing cowboys and Indians, basically, there's a scene in there that's a little odd, and the names are kind of changed around in terms of that, so that it doesn't seem racist, because it almost does. They're basically running around, we're savage characters and whatever. It's like, okay, we can change that so that it's not. She wasn't intending to be racist. She says that's what they did back then. Yeah, it was just like, yeah. The boys would have been, we're play like natives or whatever. Yeah, they might have been a little racist, but they were probably like 8, so but yeah, there doesn't need to be. Yeah, just say they're like playing cowboys or something. That's fine. Yeah, it is toned down, but there's really nothing offensive at all in the story. That wasn't why the other publishers didn't want it. It was just that there wasn't enough. There still isn't enough racy stuff, as in naughty. Nothing naughty in it. There still isn't, and it's not really made for kids, but it's not really, because of Copra Act at YouTube, but it's not really offensive. Try not to make it offensive, so we don't want to have characters suggesting First Nation people are savage or something. It's like, no, don't do that. There's an odd character. There's like a rich lady from. There's two or three different versions of the story of this one character who shows up, who's supposed to be rich, but she really isn't. Turns out she was poor. She's pretending to be rich. It's a version of the Money Smith story. So there's one version of that in there. But yeah, and you figure it's supposed to be Greenville, and even in 2005 when we visited Greenville, I was actually there. I went to Greenville, went to the house, went to all that stuff. And with the mayor, we did a book tour. And, well, it was also Dad's anniversary graduation slash last adventure. So we did the Midwestern adventure. And we went to Greenville. And Grandma Knapp had described the town so well. There was only there were only 7,000 people there in 2005. And even then, so it's a small town. Very, very, very small town. There weren't that many streets. And there was early GPS. And yeah, it's like, I figured out where everything was. Turn here, turn that. I still have that. I'm trying way around another town recently. But yeah, I still have that. And yeah, so we found the place. And Daryl, how did you know where this was? Grandma Knapp described it. It's not that big a town. Anyway, she described it quite well. There's a house, a brick house. Clarence Freese, the great-grandfather, had built houses all up and down the area. The town folk, or the lady in the little gas station 7-Eleven place kind of place was not nice, but until I mentioned the Freese name, so lighten up a little bit. Oh yeah, the Freesons, yeah, they built all the houses around here. Yeah, ancestor. But yeah, the California city slicker folk. It was kind of like we were that Money Smith League, kind of coming back there, going like, oh, like a fancy car. And it was a Prius. But yeah, yeah, did we? Yeah, drove out there, didn't we? But yeah, yeah, so we have it's funny. So yeah, we were out there, and this character in the story is apparently there's a character in the story apparently from Grand Rapids. That was the big city. Grand Rapids, the big city. It's a tiny little town, right? Grand Rapids is pretty big. I don't know what exactly the population is, but it's bigger than Milpitas. It's probably somewhere between San Francisco and like maybe Fremont or something. It's pretty big. And so yeah, this person was from Grand Rapids, basically. The big city. I know all these big city newfangled things. In the story, it's a little the short story that one of them. She was either pretending to be rich, or she was just like being herself and being like hoity, and also yeah. I think she's probably pretending a little bit, but I don't think she was completely being dishonest, because she gets the poem and all that stuff, and goes back to her land and it publishes the Estelle's dead aunt's poem from. She got it published. Hence the whole other thing that happens. It's the changed cross story, which is not the poem's not included. Although it could adapt the poem as a song, which would be awesome. So it could, because it's definitely in the public domain. It's from the version that we found is from 1910, so it should be in the public domain. It's very old. Okay, so we could adapt that as a song. Kind of fun. Yeah, Christmas play, and one of them fell. Doesn't matter, but just behind the scenes. And yeah, the Christmas play is over, so we have everything on the cast, and it's that was yesterday actually, and now we're going to do the first scene of filming, the first vignette of Blessings Deferred, a Michigan story. And this is done like a stage play. We're just ripping off the concept of a stage play, but not the story. It's not designed for kids, but it's perfectly innocent. There's nothing play in this, if I can possibly. Yes, this is Calicat, the Calicatster, and this is an attempt to turn a series of story vignette novels of Grandma Knapp into a movie. So we'll see how well this works. It's not a movie. It's more of a series of pictorial vignettes with characters from the recent Starship destinations, starring as characters from the 30s, flashing back to a long, long time ago, the galaxy far away. No, yes. So although we're starting late, it's 7. We're not doing much of this filming tonight. This is just kind of testing the waters, see how it works, and we have the this is the first story in the book. The novel, the series of vignettes that Graham and Knapp's story was based on, had a couple of chapters that were added on the beginning, and added on the end that actually didn't happen that way. And actually, the movie is going to be more accurate to the book. The movie's going to follow the book, and we just kind of took those few chapters out. They didn't need to be in there. They weren't relevant to anything. There was like a preamble thing in New York City. Some of them traveled from New York City. Let's just put them in Greenville. Let's just take them to Greenville and do the dramatic opening. And so that's what we're going to do. So we meet up with Clarence's family first. And then we meet up with Lucinda's family afterward, who come from another direction. Clarence is the outsider that comes into town from the big city of New York. Well, it was the state of New York, actually, from Albany. They were from Albany. It wasn't New York City. It was the state. Which a buggy ride in the 1860s. So it would have been right after the Civil War. And yeah, all the extra stuff about Civil War people and all that was added. That didn't need to be in this story because they really don't address it. Also, there was I mentioned in other making footage, they mentioned Native American, Indian, First Nation people a little bit, and it's a little bit off-putting. So kind of sanitize that because like they're not really a factor in the story. So yeah, it has been sanitizing more. It wasn't bad. It was just not, PC, I guess. Even though we're trying not to be PC, but yeah, this is basically a series of story vignettes told many years later, based on a 1957 manuscript and a 1973 manuscript that Graham and Knapp wrote, the two of them, and some short stories some of the short stories were attempted to be published including in a San Jose State magazine when I was at San Jose State in the 90s. Yeah, the 90s, and Reed magazine wouldn't take them. It was too weird for them. The Graham book was eventually published in 2004 through a Vanity Press type of place. We won't say the name. I think we might have in the last making of had said the name, but yeah, it's there. And ever since then, infrequently, since we no longer deal with that particular group, they apparently gave away the rights to the name to random people who call on the phone and claim that we can totally publish your book. Yeah, wow, sure they will, for a fee, of course. And they're not serious. There's no one wanting to publish the book. There's an Amazon version that was updated, listed as Volume 2, even though it's actually this. It's Volume 1, and they took out those 2 chapters, so they weren't in there. In that either. So we're using that version, the 2018 rewrite, instead of the other one, in which it's more true to the spirit of the earlier manuscript. And the story here, usually with the Chimera story, we try to do, rehearsal takes as we go, and because it's just easier that way. But because this is a series of vignettes and the dialogue is kind of fictionalized anyway, so it's not actually what they said, because that it's unlikely that Grandma Knapp in her 50s or 60s remembered it exactly the way they said it, because she wasn't there. She heard it here from second hand or third hand from her relatives. So she didn't know what her what her father and mother really said to each other when they met and they married. She probably heard that from them. But yeah. So the dialogue is a little clunky. I'm not going to fix it, but the premise is that they wanted to tell the story in the form of stories and vignettes, a bit like how some Broadway productions, some play productions, some little theater productions will do like a play thing where actors are discussing the information. It's the opposite of the show don't tell rule, because this is more of a play than it is a movie. It's a play. It's TV. It's theater. TV and theater are a little different than movies. They put TV and theater. That's Chimera movies were like that. Play, put it out. It's like a play. So, we don't need the extra rehearsals. So what we'll do it similar to that hard to film back in the day. There was a Transformers Mush episode where I had read the dialogue onto the camera and then later put in the visuals. It's kind of going to be like that, except the camera's rolling. So the camera's rolling on the visuals, so you'll see the visuals. It's just easier and quicker to film that way. And so the camera will be rolling on which individual actor is talking in a given scene. Now, when they said show don't tell in story writing and in script writing, story for scripts and stuff, they want that. But here we have plastic action figures that don't emote, so that's impossible anyway. So don't worry about that. But it's less a Sesame Street thing and more 6 Degrees of Separation with Graham Knapp. It's more like that. It's more like almost like Werner Herzog and Terrence Malick got together. They said to do it, even though they couldn't have ever met, and had like this weird sort of, well, a little Neil Simon thrown in. I mean, no, I'm giving all these names of famous people, but no, it's not. It's not on the level of that at all. It's very much a fanfic type of thing, but not Slash. So let's see how this works. I've set up these characters for this opening scene. This is the scene where we encounter Estelle Graham Knapp's namesake, who is dying of malaria, the ague. And that's a dramatic scene to open your story. This story starts with that, and then there's so this is Clarence's older sister who's dying. She wrote a poem, which then was passed around through the family through practically a generation, changed across. The poem ended up being passed on to a famous character that they encountered, sort of famous, like local celeb, I guess, kind of you could say. And she took it to her church, and the church put it in their playbill and wrote it. It's an anonymous story. It was Estelle Fries that wrote it originally. Graham Knapp's ancestor, Graham Knapp's aunt, essentially, that she never knew, her aunt. And what was fun is during this thing, we have two versions of that poem, and the music is either done through the tune of "As the Deer" or "Into the Garden." Went for the more "Into the Garden" version. Did a little bit of a thing with change some of the words so that it flows as an iambic pentameter poem and as a hymn, and sung it, and did a piano thing of it. We'll see how well that works. It may just use the piano thing. May use the a cappella singing. May use that at the end as the end credits. That'll be fun. And since it is rewritten, so that it's more, so that it's not that it's more modern. It's so that it actually rhymes better. Because this is a teenager writing a poem. It's not going to be perfect, right? In the story, she's a teenager. So yeah, but in the story, this is in the 1860s, late 1860s, early 1870s. So it's not going to be perfectly poetry though. but it was put in this church playbill later on. It's public domain, but I did change the music lyrics a little, just to make it match. You may not decide to use it at all. You may just use the piano, and I put music to it to make it sound a little more like a hymn. So, yeah, so updated something from the 30s, from 90 years ago, the 30s version, updated to, let's make it sound more, yeah. Anyway, so, yeah, because it was the 30s play version that we had, the 30s version from the playbill. That was where it's from. It was cut out of the 2018 book because, well, it didn't fit there, but it was passed on to this famous person later on in the 1910s, who goes out and goes back to Grand Rapids. There's a famous character who, to them, is famous and rich and wealthy because they're from this tiny little town in Greenville that isn't very big. Back then it was probably hundreds of people. Even in 2005, it was when we were there. We visited for the book signing, and among other things. It was a population of 7,000. So it's probably not much bigger than that now. I don't think so. But yeah, it's a small town. So we were city slickers in that small town. Anyway, so yeah, let's do it. Let's try it. Let's try this weird vignette idea thing. I think Grandma Nap would approve of the idea, the concept. Actually getting a maid for, she would have no idea how they could put, like, back in the day. Well, she was around up until 1996. She knew about television. She'd have no, and early internet, but she had no idea about the early internet or anything like that. But she was extremely good at typing on a manual typewriter, 130 words a minute for the Gibson Refrigerator Company. She was also vocally talented and opened for Kate Smith of God Bless America in the 1930s, and yeah, stuff like that. So she was semi-famous, and we come from a long line of hams, generations of hams, so that dad's side of the family. Anyway, so let's try this. Yeah. Excellent, a dramatic scene, and yeah, Clarence Freese, great-grandfather Clarence Freese, did carry out the promise of Grandma Nap was named Estelle Freese was named after her aunt. So yes. So yeah, and the poem was passed on to the famous lady and put in a church playbill thing, and then almost 90 years later, now it's in the theme song of the movie. So yeah, so that thing went even further than the other things. But yes, dramatic scene. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether all the names were. I think Grandma changed some of the names around, but his name was Clarence, and yeah, so I'm pretty sure her name was Amanda. So, but it might not have been. So they changed some names around just because Grandma didn't want to set an apple cart, so to speak, and didn't want to use the names of people that were then living in 1957 and 73. So some of the names were changed around. Some of them strangely, because they shouldn't have been changed to those particular names, but sure. This was just a test of a scene. Well, it was 4 pages roughly, and I think it went well. But I was not planning on doing much more filming on this tonight. I just wanted to test a scene and see how it looks. So yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll just do what I'm doing. And we'll have narrated scenes that will lead to other narrated scenes. With minimal set accoutrements. And they'll just go from there. We have a bed there. But yeah, the scene. So yeah, it's probably the most religious thing I've ever put out there. So interestingly enough, but yeah, it's not cloying. It's not pandering. It's very much a drama at this point. And a dramatic, not a musical because it's not a musical, a drama. It's a drama. So yeah, I'm going to meet up with Clarence later. I think I'm going to be done for the evening just because just wanted to see how it looks. And so we'll go on tomorrow. Well, it is, the lighting isn't great. So, and yeah. And I have no idea whether the Clarence's father was bald. The other side of the family, I don't know, but that's funny. And also we have a scene for Belana Torres there as Amanda Price. It's funny. And Kirk is playing Clarence there, and Troy is playing Estelle, and Troy is also playing Estelle later on, the other Estelle for Grand Nat, which is funny. So yeah. But yeah, So there we go. I guess the implication is in the story is that she's Grandma Knapp is putting on a play version of her life story, parents meeting, life story, family story later on in the 30s, and this is it. Even though it's technically, yeah. So the backgrounds kind of look like old-timey book pieces from an old book. It's kind of cool. Yeah. The set looks real fancy schmancy and at the same time old and trashy, and and literally the paints were left over from the Chimera set. Didn't spend any money on those, and except for the car set. And these are old. These are box things. About $12 worth of box things, just chopped up and painted up to look like these old timey book cover quilt things. Yeah, so this is their old timey looking thing, and their old timey outfits that look more like 20s era, but maybe it's like 1935 or 36, and we're gonna pretend like it's 60 years earlier and do that, yeah. Maybe that's what they're doing. They're doing like a little theater thing before the age of Hollywood. Just about the beginning of the age of sound. So there's there's sound in Hollywood, yeah. Maybe like Irvington is we'll do this thing, yeah, this is real sometime. Or Chicago or somewhere. Probably Chicago. Or Chicago grandma. But anyway, so yeah, we have this set, so cool. There was everybody, and someone's dying. Anyway. Okay, this is Blessings in Greenville. Blessings Deferred again. Scene 2, the dance where Mom and Dad met. Yeah, so this is being read like it's a audiobook slash play slash well, not slash, but audiobook play. And also a motion comic, because there isn't much motion in it. So here we go. Yeah, so here we're doing making of here. And even though the box social isn't much of a scene, we want to have something going on in it just to convey that something interesting is happening. And here we have Holy Cat and Amanda. Lucinda was related to Pastor Turner. Was adopted. Yeah, so it's his pastor's daughter, basically. Yeah, I think she was. Yeah, at least in the story. So it's kind of funny. So let's begin. Okay, this is going to be scene 6. It's not very long. Do scene 6. It's mostly description of a house. It's a couple of pages. It goes up to 27. I think we'll do that, because the Grace scene later on is a little more. There's a little more going on, although it is just two people. Kind of a flashback, yeah, but it wouldn't make sense out of context like that anyway. So yeah, it's what she talked at the reading about. So you could put the Grace and story 6 or 7 and 8 together because they're the same story. She's just equating the story during the visit. So even though it is earlier when it happened, it's not really earlier. It's her telling a story. Yeah, this whole thing is told later in 1957. So yeah, so it jumps around just a little bit. That's fine. Anyway, so pausing here. Yeah, so that was the Grace Hordman thing. This is day 2. Well, technically full day on set of the Graham and Knapp of photo novel, I guess you'd call it, play. Yeah, because there's not very much action, motion, comic, the duality thing, but Star Trek people. But they're not playing the Star Trek people, they're playing the 1800s people at this point. We get in the 1800s, the Old West, well, it's the Midwest. Yeah, and you have the Ordman. We don't know whether their last name was actually Ordman or that the other family was named Porter Smith. They might have mixed them up just because Graham and Knapp didn't want to actually use their real last names. Their first names are probably their names, though, for the other ones. Yeah. I never knew Grace Ordman at all. I was trying to think to whether I knew of any Graham and Knapp's siblings that would that were in the cast. I think I did meet Uncle Roy, and I did meet some of the other ones, and Little Doll, and I think I might have, or at least one of the other siblings. They're their aunts on Graham's side, but they would be great aunts, great uncles, and I think that Roy was the most impact because he was the most colorful. He was a World War I guy, and he was having memory problems and stuff. He had Alzheimer's later on. And I think I met him when I was a teenager, or a young teenager. So they came out here. So yeah. So I met him when I was a young teenager. So and then he died. So he's not around. Graham and Knapp was 90 in 1986, so she outlived all of them. So it must have been a little before that. Also, there's probably some confusion as to whether Mom's brothers, uncles, not brothers, or uncles, were also included in there. But I don't think they were them. I think it was Uncle Roy from Grandma's side that I saw. I don't think it was one of the brothers. So I think I met Ernest too. I think I met the other brother too. Yeah, both of them. But yeah, a long time ago. So yeah, they were all old men by then. Of course, to a 13-year-old boy, they would have appeared very old. So, but yeah, very very old. They were probably in their 80s. So yeah, they would have been old. So yeah, they would have been old. Yeah, but yeah, but anyway, so yeah, yeah. And as we get older, my sister Martha looks more like Aunt Martha, and then Grandma Knapp's dad's side of the family, and I look more like Mom's side of the family. I look like Grandpa Albert. Oh well, yeah. So kind of funny. Yeah. So here we are. It's funny that in the story they mentioned that Lucinda's sister Grace in the story. That she looks, one of her kids looks like her. Well, the genetics. They didn't know about genetics back then, but yeah, they tend to have characters repeat similar features and stuff. So, even though I look like my mom's side of the family, I've got the smile from the Aunt Martha dead grandma's side of the family. But yeah, so yeah, but yeah, and that, so it's a little different. So then there's yeah, oh, this is going to be more filming. This is the buggy accident scene. Well, the aftermath, because yeah, obviously we can't film that. Anyway, here is the next scene. Actually, I wear glasses also, but normally when I'm doing this, they're for distance. This is close up. Anyway, yeah, it would seem that what transpired is the buggy did not crush her head because of the muddy ground, and she had a massive concussion, and that would do that. Yeah, it'd mess you up. Anyway, so but the character in the story has the action figure is much older than 4, but yeah, 4 or 5. It seems that this scene takes place before the other one, kind of, but we're not sure in the timeline whether it would probably since the grandmother's never mentioned again. I think Grandma Knapp intended for this story to be after that. So she was 4 or 5. So they lied about it being 5 in the other story, probably closer to 4. And the grandmother's death was in like the summer, and this is in the fall, early winter. So it's a little later. It works in the timeline. So yeah. Now we'll go on to the next short episode. Okay, I don't think I'm going to do any more of this tonight. I've done an incredible amount of it, actually. Started around 49 and now on 77. That's because it's not a Star Trek story where you have to rehearse each line. It's a photo play, so it's going straight through, like blazing through it. Yeah, it looks like tomorrow we'll easily be able to finish part 2 and go on to part 3. I'd rather not continue tonight for another hour into part 2 and get it done and have it had to be redone later on. I'd rather save that for later and do that later. The 3 or 4 scenes in here don't have any weird medical issues or anything to mention. They didn't have measles vaccine back then, that measles episode, so they all got it. They probably would have caught it anyway, but they didn't know about that kind of medicine back then. Also, yeah, Ernest almost drowning. The story that was a story that Grandma Knapp told as well. The raft story. She tended to, in some of her short stories, to not do the build up, the illustrations, the setup for the scenes, And in the book version, we added the setup for the scenes to describe what was going on. She tended to just get into the dialogue like it was script. She would have been better as a script writer, I think, than a storybook, like a children's storybook writer. When this story was marketed, it was more of a set of children's story vignettes than an adult story, which just had that kind of stuff going on. It might seem similar to some other stuff out there, but she was influenced a little by it, I'm sure, but not directly. It certainly wasn't anything. I don't think she was influenced that much by like, say, Mark Twain or something when they're on a raft. That scene, there's a similar scene in there, but I don't think she was. I don't think she was aware of that really. But yeah, because it actually happened to her brothers. I'm assuming that because these guys were children and they were young, that the impact they would have had would have been different from the adults. And of course, in this story, we don't have childlike Playmates action figures, so we can't actually do that. Also, we couldn't put them in water and do a raft scene. It's strange. So, yeah. Also, the enacting the scene with Dr. Beck and the lady was kind of funny, and having the Germanic doctor thing in there. I threw that in there. That is in there. That is in there. We're not sure if his name was really Beck or if the other lady's name was Beck, but yeah, she apparently administered special medicine. And we're going to pass the halfway point and go beyond as far as we can with the script here. This is the berry picking one. And yeah, it is weird that they're adults playing children, but they don't make child Playmates figures, and that would look strange anyway. So it's theater. They're playing in the theater. So there we go. It's as if it's already the 1930s.
And they're looking back on the stories they're telling, basically. So, yeah, that's the deal. Yeah. So they're telling a story to the audience. Now, here we go.
The book, the book thing. We were up in Greenville. We were city slickers in Greenville because compared to the town back then of 7,000, we were city slickers. And then the way the things were described in the town, it was like the storefronts were still there and all that was still there. Like in California, nothing lasts very long at all, and they take it down and they replace it. No, this stuff was hundreds of years old, and it was up there and all that. And I was trying to figure out where things were and all when we were there. And yeah, it wasn't until I tried to explain to the lady at the gas station map place that we were descended from the Freeses, that we were looking to go to see our ancestors' old house. That the lady in there who was didn't like city folk was then realized, oh, okay, they're transplants from Michigan. Yeah. Needless to say, we didn't get any free ice cream either. So, so the next story is there were like two similar stories. I think one was cut out. I think the other one was not included. The Money Smith story was similar enough to this one that this one was kept instead. This is allegedly the Annie Sterling story. That name is made up. Grandma made it up. That wasn't her name. And no, she was not a DeKruiger. That's silly. She wasn't the hired girl either. That would be silly. She was this other character. Unusual character, I think, was the title of it originally. And Money Smith was the other one. So there was like this weird, fairly long short story coming up in the story. So my guess is from the story that she was from Grand Rapids, which was the big city back then, and that she was not necessarily a charlatan, but she put on airs to make herself look better, kind of a charlatan, a little bit. But that she didn't intend malice, she just wanted to fit in. That's kind of the implication of the story. Anyway, so let's read the story. And I have no idea who it is. And if somebody else comes out saying, oh, I was the Sterling thing, you weren't, because the name has been changed. So if anybody complains later on, no, you weren't that it's a different person. Anyway, so yeah. So yeah, the changed cross. 1930 edition, anonymous, the changed cross. So even though, so what happened here is these were Grand Rapids socialite Michiganders who actually were as poor as the Freeses were. But their daughter was kind of, young and wanted to impress everybody. So she was basically, kind of a storyteller, makeup kind of thing, you know the type. There's always one in a high school going on about how awesome things they have. I knew of at least 2 or 3 in my high school. Not going to name names. Back in the day, they were doing that. And and turns out they weren't rich. They were just like everyone else. That's the message of the story. It's interesting that Grandma also wrote about the poem thing being given as part of the wedding gift thing, and that later in Grand Rapids, that was given to that little church, which stuck around, and a version of it was later published about 25 years later in 1930 in their church bulletin thing under an anonymous name, and it was Freese. It was the sister. And now it's 93 years later, and and it's the theme song to this episode, to this movie. So 93 years later, that poem is the theme song. So it did see print, and it got all the way to the West Coast, and ended up in this weird little fan film of my grandmother. So there you go. It's famous now. It's famous. So there you go. So. Yeah, well, we too are not that rich, so it's no AdSense. We're not making any money on it. So again, it's kind of anonymous, but yes, we know that the original Estelle Freese wrote it, that Grandma Knapp was named after. Grandma Estelle Marion Freese Brown with an E, Knapp, was named after. So it's still around. So yeah.
We had slightly rewrite it. The wording was a little weird on some of it, but we rewrote it. So it's the same poem. We just changed it. We wanted to make it rhyme better. It wasn't meant to be a song originally. It was a poem. Yeah, I think it works. So, yeah. And there's a connection to this other character. She was not named Sterling in the story originally. It was some other last name. But Holbert is the name of the church parishioner lady from 1930. That was the Holbert family. They were that actually is a name that was kept. so yeah, you can look that up. The changed cross. That version is in the public domain. It's over 90 years ago. So anyway, so yeah. And we're not using that version quite. We're using the earlier. Yeah. Yeah. So this next section will be the hired girl. And yeah, even though I guess in that time period you could hire a maid or whatever, servant maid kind of thing. The book does not indicate in any way that this is any kind of ethnicity. She was white, so don't think, oh no, they have nope. She was described as blonde and blue-eyed, so, or at least brunette and blue-eyed. So she was not of any ethnicity. She was white, basically, the hired girl. There were two hired girls, and they were white. So, yeah. It's in the story like that. So. Anyway, so here we go. So if this was like 1906 when this happened, then, yeah, she's not a decryger, obviously. But also, Grandma Knapp couldn't cook, which is kind of funny, being one of 9 children. She didn't know how to cook, so... all the descriptions of cooking and stuff must be from her siblings. We talked about it. She wasn't very good at cooking. But neither am I too great at cooking either. So, anyway. Yeah, she wasn't a decryger. But that would be amusing. But yeah, we can't say everybody is related to everybody. That doesn't make sense. She's probably more closely related to Annie, the other lady. Unless she's a Chitska and she's related to Teresa, Barbara's ex. Probably not that either. Come on. That's not canon. Anyway, so yeah. I'm assuming that they had a lot of maids and servants back, even though they were old and poor. I wonder how they afforded that. It's odd. Anyway, so we're trying to see whether this is the other camera. And yeah, 117. Yeah, it looks okay. I guess it's working. So let's try it. So that this is the second to the last chapter, the penultimate chapter. Chiming in just to say that the health scare story is interesting. It's at the end of the story, near the end here, and yeah, she did actually have tongue cancer later on in the early 80s, but it was a tiny, like a melanoma kind of thing. They took it out. But yeah, the palpitating heart. I guess the surgery was some kind of a heart thing, but in the 30s, I can't imagine what it would have been, because they go down her throat, and I can't imagine what they would have done in 1933 that would have done that. Needless to say, she lived Needless to say, she lived well beyond that story that she wrote about in 1975, and lived until the year 1996, the ripe old age of 99. She was just 3 weeks shy of 100. I'd say that doctor was full of crap. That said she had cancer. He was full of crap. She outlived Eugene because he passed away at age 65 or so in a train accident. Ironically, he was a train person, but in a train accident. And then she later married a guy named Carl Knapp, who was a very big man, and he sort of ate himself to death. And he was kind of well-to-do, so they traveled the world and everything. So she got to be, and that's where her last name Knapp comes from. Still Knapp. Anyway, let's go on to the next story, and yeah, so. So this is going to be an attempt to do the changed cross song part of the song part of the poem again, because
I started to get an Irish accent for some reason. And it didn't stay an Irish accent, so we can't use that. What? So it doesn't have an Irish accent. Don't try to do an accent. We'll try it over again. And I also revised some of the lines, so it's more of a song than a poem. So this is they changed across second take or third take or whatever for the Blessings Deferred book. And here we go. So I will pause that. Okay, this is Calicat the Calicatster, and I'm putting together the making of Blessings Deferred here. And there's no closing chapter. They get up to the penultimate episode, and then they don't say anything after that. A lot has already been said on the making of. It's a little over an hour and 17 minutes. So we don't need to go into the background or anything like that because it's already there. During the credit editing process, there was a lot of extra. We essentially took the Starship Destinations credits template and changed it into this template. Just changed it around, changed the names around. It's the same cast as Starship Destinations, and the convention. Same cast of characters. Yeah, so it's not like the Ken Burns documentary in the 80s where it was like pictures of the Civil War. It's not quite that still, but it is similar to the early still moving pictures of the 30s, of the 10s and 20s and 30s. They had sound pictures by the 30s. They had and color in moving pictures. So this is sort of a throwback to that. I think I had mentioned in the previous thing that the way it was set up, it was like a play, like it's a performance, as if it is the 1930s, and Graham and App's children would be my father and my aunt that have passed since then, that they put together a play about Grandma's book. And this is the result, so it's kind of what it is. Before Grandma ever wrote the book. But that early didn't, yeah. So they're all adults. And everybody's playing stuff. Well, they wouldn't be adults. They'd be kids. But there aren't any children in the story, and it is weird because you look at it, it's like, why are they all adults and they're standing around? They're clearly like Star Trek figures. But we didn't have the other figures to animate, and we just wanted to make an animated thing. So it's kind of like a narrated. It breaks the fourth wall in that it's all tell, don't show, which you don't do in a movie, but it's more like a TV show. It's more like a play. It's more like a Terrence Malick sort of play on life, and you listen to the audio basically. You almost don't need to watch the video to just listen to the audio. It's an audio, a motion audio play basically. It'd be like if they took that Spock versus Q thing and had them standing as action figures in the background the whole time. It does work, but yeah, obviously we have no budget for anything other than that. So that's what you get. That's fine. I noticed that a lot of other content creators on YouTube create elaborate things, and even we've created more elaborate things. But in this case, we wanted to get this Christmas special type of thing out before Christmas and have it done, and trucked along and did it all in a week, and during the same time as the church Christmas play, and just a little near the end, and near the very end of the play actually. Then we started doing this week. We'll be seeing Mark's cards later on, but not on the tape. It won't be on the tape. Yeah, he's listed as a consultant, but I don't think he was involved in this version, and the parts that he was involved in were cut out, so they were added scenes and alliterations and transitions that were just, we didn't need for the transitions, because it threw it off anyway. It didn't actually happen, and you figure that's not really a bad thing necessarily that the transitions were cut off, because in some of the early stuff before the Greenville, because you don't need, you're trying to tell a movie version of the story. You're trying to tell a Spielbergian movie of the story, and you want to get everybody to Greenville and start there. And even though it takes place over almost a generation in the story, well, it does take place over a generation and a half. for like 60 years. That 2 generations, maybe 3. If you count 20 years as a generation, yeah, it takes place over long over that. It starts in 1870 something and runs on to 1930 something. But it's like 90 years ago they were doing the story, and this is it. So that's the way it's filmed. And so we have mainly narration by Clint Cowpoke, and directing by Clint Cowpoke. Because that made sense, even though Cowpoke is not from the Midwest, supposedly. He's supposedly from Oklahoma. But he's not. It's because he really likes that Grapes of Wrath play. But yeah, it's interesting. We were able to pull that off. The original book had been released in 2003, and under this unmentionable Vanity Press, and even though we did get it published. See, I had promised Grandma Knapp when I was 19, at my 19th birthday, that I would publish her book one day. She had a book. It was the 73 version and the 57 version. There were 2 versions of it. And she said, I have no doubt you will publish my book one day. But she passed away in 1996, and so it wasn't until 2003 or 4 that we found the manuscript was found mysteriously. The other version had been lost, and we found the 73 version and parts of the 57 version's notes, and literally all of the notes from the short story collection. So we're like, yeah, it's all here. So let's do an update of it. So I also learned how to type better by typing it up, because we had to type it up back then. There was not any way to scan OCR scan in 2003. We probably could have, but we didn't. The whole book into a readable format. She typed it up on a manual. So yeah, so that 73 book manuscript, I believe, is in a box somewhere in storage, so it's saved. But yeah, there's 2 other versions. So the short stories were set up as a collection. There were several relatives worked on it. Aunt Martha was the historian. I became the historian. Dan and nephew was briefly the historian, but doesn't really have all that collection. Dad passed away in 2009. Aunt Martha passed away in 2015. So there was in 2018, the book was re-released under a different publisher. I can say them, Amazon. And then subsequently 27 more of my books between 2018 and 2023. So there's a bunch of my stuff out there. Under the name of either Calcat and Mark's Cards and Brown and Jaeger and all that. It's unlikely that we'll do an on-location one. I don't see any reason to tackle on location at Pine Hill and do a thing and bring it to Pine Hill. That was just for Starship Destinations. It was fine just to have it mentioned, have a little in the background. There's really no reason to do that. It would be the same kind of story. All the dialogue. That would be a pain in the butt. It was just too long. It's 5 years of series for season 1 and series 1, and another 5 years for the Evergreen, the college years, and another 4 for the San Jose State years, and then all the other spin-offs, a First Press series and all that. No, it's too big. It's too big. Also too big is Mom's email stories. She's still around. She's up in Roseville. And, but also a lot of those people are still living, and it would be weird. Everything would have to be changed, and then it would lose something if we had to change all that. So we just won't release the email stories and just not release it. That one's huge. It's as big as On Location. It's huge. Thousands of pages. That would be too long. Probably a lot of it's repeats though, but there's really no point in repeating that one. She was as prolific with letter writing as I was with stories, but mostly. The blessings deferred, blessings attained, blessings thing. There any other I had added a bunch of comments and things that I later deleted on the end of the credits thing, saying different things were going on. And I felt that was a little strange. I didn't need to do that. We were trying I wanted to get to the poem all fits in there fine. First part of the poem's in the beginning credits, and the end credits have the last of the poem in there. It is heavily rewritten, and we did the music for it twice, and the second time around this morning, I was all like, I'm going to do the music over again like it actually sounds, as opposed to trying to copy some other hymn. So it really sounds. Here's what's going to be. So it is like similar to "Oh My Heart" at this point, but yeah. But yes, it's different enough. But yeah, the ancient poem that Estelle Knapp's aunt, who she never knew, had. That was the most interesting part of some of the backstory. Was this ancient poem had got around. A copy of it had been given to the fancy lady who they thought was rich because her mother was a dressmaker, and she said, "Oh, my stuff's from France." It wasn't really, but yeah, young teenager bragging about stuff. So what? It wasn't like she was older like Money Smith was. Money Smith was a character that was left out. Was this other lady that was doing the same spiel, similar story. So yeah, we don't need that. But yeah, so we didn't include that one. It wasn't even in the book at this point. It was edited out of this version. Yeah, there was also another story that was in there about. There was another. It wasn't in the book. It was cut out. There was an Aunt Martha, great Aunt Martha, who the chicken. She had a chicken story where she was stealing the neighbor's chickens from their farm. She's not even mentioned in the book anywhere. She would be on Brown's side anyway. So the Brown side. So that's why she wasn't mentioned. Also, there was a story about. This was Aunt Martha, Grandma, and them having seen a killing or murder or something in Chicago. Well, it was the 20s, right? The 20s and 30s. And I imagine probably saw that a couple of times back then. And it was misread as a story about they caused it or they were involved in it or something. No, the kids and the grandma saw somebody get killed. That was a domestic dispute in their apartment. Somebody got killed. So they weren't witness to it. They were just afterwards. So that story is like, they're all embellished on and everything. No, it was that they thought somebody was dead. Somebody died. Somebody got cacked. So but yeah, but yeah, that was a story that was left out because so what would be the point? Just mentioning somebody got cacked. That doesn't need to be in there. This is PG-13 thing. It's like this G-rated thing, really. It's nothing like that. I suppose the PETA people would freak out if they ever made a movie out of this, like a feature film. They'd be like, "Oh, I can't believe those kids running around like hunting and killing those animals and stuff all over the place." I thought I should mention that too. That it's like, it was the ancient Midwest, and whatever you killed, you had to eat it. So even though that is messed up, that they kill a turtle or kill a skunk or something, you wear a raccoon skin hat or something, or you'd wear the pelt from the animal or something, or use the deer meat or use the cow meat or whatever. That's what they did back then. They weren't doing it for sport. They were doing it to eat the animal and then maybe keep some part of it for some reason. It's gross, but yeah, but different sensibility, different time. Yeah. So also there was the character of the Grace character. I don't know if that's her real name, but it's said to be Grace. Having married really young to that young farmer guy, and but they did stuff like that back then, so that's not unusual either. They still do that stuff if you think about it. A lot of Hollywood famous people will be like, I'm going to find this young lady and marry her, and the guy's like older, you know. They're like, yeah, they do that a lot. And this wasn't Hollywood back then. It was a music type. So, it's just what they did in the countryside and stuff. You know, that old joke that they say about the Appalachians, which is further in the east. As any virgin is a 13-year-old can outrun her brother or cousin. But it's like yeah, because in that part of the world they're like, yeah, not paying attention. But I don't think anything directly like that happened in this story at all. So also, it is weird that in that time period, even though they were poor and everything, that they had a hired girl or a hired hand or something. But maybe that was common back then. Maybe they had that. None of them were of African American descent or Native American descent. They were all like immigrants from apparently Holland and Friesland and places like that. A lot of those. So they were white, and they weren't indentured servants or something. It was they were there to. If you have 9 kids, you're raising them. I suppose you need a maid, basically. Yeah. So yeah, that was that. And no, they were not related to the Criers. That was just, I don't know how that got in there. I did point out when putting the story together that yeah, that's not true. It wouldn't make sense. More so, she'd probably be related to the other relative. But no, that's unlikely, if not impossible. But yes, but it is interesting that the girl, the stories in there that is accurate, that one of the names is the same last name. It isn't changed. Of the married name of the lady who became who was the girl making up stories about being rich, and they find out she isn't. The married name. She went to her church in Grand Rapids, and eventually took Clarence's. She had a copy of Clarence's famous poem, and she gave it to the church to put in the playbill. So years later, 25 years later, they put it in the playbill. Many years later, so I imagine her offspring probably did. One of her kids did. And I imagine he or she was like, "Oh, this is neat. This is the thing I found, and I'm going to put it in there. It's anonymous. I don't know who wrote it. Probably didn't. She probably wasn't around to ask, but she probably would have said, "Oh, that was Estelle Fries. That was little Estelle's aunt, who she never knew, who died of malaria, and she wrote this, and it should say Estelle Fries by Estelle Fries on it. Clarence Fries is dead, but they didn't tell him that. But it was in the family that happened." And in the playbill, it's in the public domain. So the song is in this version is very similar to that song. It's changed a little, but very similar. And yes, so this is actually a very Christian episode, but it's not evangelical Christian. It's more like it's quite Pentecostal. It's I would say it's like congregational, like Presbyterian, they don't dance much kind of thing, story. And it's not heavy-handed about it, which is nice. It doesn't have any hypocrisies and things like that. It's just, that's what it is. Nice little story. I don't know why those other publishers wouldn't publish it for decades and decades, trying to publish a story. I can see why the original draft did have some issues that had to be worked out. That essentially a family diary of stories is, unless something racy happens, and it doesn't, it's not that exciting, and maybe it was too similar to other stuff. I would think that though in the 50s, Reader's Digest, or the 70s, a Reader's Digest would have taken it twice over on, but they didn't. Just because Grandma Knapp opened for Kate Smith, she didn't actually go on to become super famous. Yeah, what happened there? In the book, the book barely mentions it at all, Kate Smith, or barely mentions it. So I included a scene where the action figures meet. So an action figure of Kate Smith, the Miss Luxana Troy character in the story, the action figure meets Estelle, who was being played by Deanna Troy, which is weird, and she meets her from the story. Apparently shortly after that, she dropped out of Fame and Fortune. She dropped out of doing all the circuits. So shortly after that, within a year or so, she dropped out of doing the chocolate circuits to raise a family in Chicago. So she wasn't there that long, enough to know the God Bless America lady to open for her. But yeah, that's what happened there. I cannot figure out what the condition she had, palpitating heart thing, how they would have in the 30s dealt with Grandma Knapp's palpitating heart. Would they have just like stuck a hole in there and just then patched it up or something? I don't know what they would have done to the 30s about that. They didn't have they just I don't know what they would have done. But yeah, they didn't have open heart stuff back then. But she did eventually get a form of cancer on her tongue, which was taken off in the 70s, the early 80s, and had to, so she had a little bit of a slur in her voice after that. But yeah, that was later. I remember when I was a kid, she had that. She became famous in town in Milpitas. The other names and stuff, since I cut them out of the post credits because it was silly. I'll just mention them here. I'll just mention the Carl Knapp thing. Okay, so Eugene Brown, her first husband, he died ironically in a train accident. He's a train railroad man. Apparently, he got drunk, and in the 60s, and he got hit by a train, and then so Prohibition ended, and women were given the right to vote, that kind of thing. That all ended, and then later on, Grandma Knapp met a guy named Carl Knapp, who was a sort of a jet setter of his day in the 60s. And in her retirement, she got to travel all over the place and went on many adventures, wrote about them. Mostly she collected a lot of postcards that are completely, I have no idea what they were other than where they've been. There was another story in there about her going to, that was in the later short stories about her going to Thailand with Aunt Martha when Aunt Martha was in her early 20s, I think, and writing about that. And seeing the palace where the Queen of Siam was, and commenting on the palace. So yeah, but yeah. Other than that I didn't think to mention that in the story either, because it's like, yeah. So Carl Knapp stopped to going around everywhere, and apparently got so big and bloated that he ate himself to death. And so they were in Ottumwa, Iowa, I think, at that point. And then they moved from Iowa with the couch that's in the living room and all that stuff and the china cabinet and all that. I tried to show the china cabinet thing with the other thing, and then it was like, wait a minute, that the glass she was talking about wasn't in there, so we don't have that. She had other stuff, and so she came to down here in 1971, and by then Dad was the mayor, so there, and then there was here, and she came out here, and she was instrumental in the church Wise One service thing. And my mother was also, even though she was only in her 40s, and at the time, and there was she was instrumental in the beginning of the local church, the then called First Presbyterian Church in Milpitas. It's interesting that some of the things are similar. That there's box social or potlucks. There's kind of potlucks more like a bring food for everybody kind of thing, whereas the box social is more like a lunch dinner thing, and you bring the little dinner box. We don't really do that now, but it's kind of like a potluck. what they would later call a potluck, for the youth, I guess, is more or less. Yes, you could kind of do that. So so it was similar to a Presbyterian thing. Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, a lot of the other fidgety things are not necessary to know about. There were refunded mention in the making of that things were not included. And but all the chapters that were included were the ones we're going to use, so they're all in there. Almost cut out the Grace Ordinance story, which is a little shocking for that time period with the crotchety old Gleasons. And no, the Gleasons, that name is fake. And no, we were not thinking of the Honeymooners and the Cramdens, but kind of. But no, that story actually happened. Apparently, this old buzzard guy was hired girl was this Aunt Grace person, great Aunt Grace, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, and I already mentioned the Greenville not taking it kindly to right away to us city slickers from Milpitas. I ain't never heard of a place like that. Oh, no. Anyway, so Milpitas. Milpitas. Yes. I looked up the current population of Greenville, and it has gone up by 2,000 people since 2006. This is much. So it's about 9,000 people living there instead of 7,000. Milpitas has 70,000, and we're a little town compared to San Jose right over there. And San Jose is a million people. And then they always say San Francisco is the city because that's the important one, and that's 50 miles from here. San Francisco. Ooh, we're in San Francisco in the Bay Area. But San Jose is 3 times. Well, I wouldn't say 3 times. It's twice as big as San Francisco. I think San Francisco is like 600,000 or something. It's not a million. But yeah, it's all spread out. So, yeah. I guess that's pretty much it for the behind the scenes then of Blessings Deferred, a Greenville story. The Disneyland trip is tomorrow. I have another song that's been sitting in the library that needed to be redone. So this is the Changed Cross one, the one from Estelle Knapp's Aunt That You Didn't Know, from the 1870s, which was the original version was for the Blessings Deferred, the Michigan story, and the version that I did 2 years ago, well, a little less than 2 years ago, the piano was overdriving the music and you couldn't understand the words. So I'm going to fix that by recompiling it together. So I'll do the poem and then I'll switch to the music. Actually, the musical score from the piano music from Star Trek Meets the Brady Bunch actually it has riffs taken from this song anyway. So I could really just use them. And they would work because they're riffs from this song. So yeah, but I probably should do it over. Yeah. Boy. So here it is. Poem, simple poem. All right. So know what this is. Okay. You don't need to see me because I'm just singing it over here. And let's do a rehearsal. Take it as. I think the problem with the original one was the same problem with the other one, the Robotech one, in that I was trying too hard to make it match their version of it, and it didn't syncopate correctly. Same problem with years ago on my When It Rescues Me song where it didn't quite match correctly. I think the trick to this one is make it more of a poem. And don't worry about how it fits with the melody,
because it's the song, and then you do a melody, and then you song. It's not a hymn where you have to sing the hymn exactly. It is kind of a hymn, but it's not dependent on the hymn's melody notes. It's not like Amazing Grace or something. It's more like Be Still My Heart, as to dear, than anything. And the Rugged Cross, like where this is going to be an attempt to do this and get the there's Grandma Knapp's aunt, 1870, after Civil War. It's a really old song. It was produced by. It was done in a church thing, and then it was in the early 1900s. It was anonymous, but it was Estelle Knapp's namesake, Grandma Knapp's namesake, and I know I discussed it on the making of the other thing. I'm going to re-release the Blessings Deferred thing with change the title credits up and make it officially canon as part of from Starship Locations, the lost years or whatever, and do that. But up on one of the channels, because Starship Locations. It's a Starship Locations. It's a season of stories that takes place roughly after 2 years ago. Roughly after the events of the Fallen Ones planet story. Either after or before. Probably just after. So it's before Destinations. Yeah, so it's right in there before Destinations. It's December of 2023, and it and then family members. One specific family member didn't like it. It was then the producer. Didn't like it. She's no longer the producer. Her son Daniel's the producer now. Yeah, Dan Brown, he doesn't mind. So why can't there be why can't you post your? I mean, it's not insulting in any way. It's just it's old. Yeah, it's an audio book. Yeah, put it up. but yeah, so so I wanted to redo the song, and right here. This is Calcat the Calcatster, and you're going to be watching a re-release, the Blessings Deferred re-release as a Starship Location story, Greenville Starship Location story. I don't think you need the making of 2-hour special that does all the making of, which was on the old channel, because it's basically, it's a little over wordy. So I'll just summarize a lot of what was in there. Around 2023, around Christmas time, just before, a couple of weeks before Christmas time, I produced a sort of audiobook of my grandmother Estelle Knapp's novel. An audiobook miniseries. 6 hours of me reading the book, but did it with the background of Star Trek figures from the troop, from the LARPing troop story. The LARPing troop that has now been turned into zombies, but has been recreated in the other story. But there aren't zombies anymore. They've been healed. So, but anyway, so this is before. This is the origin of the LARPing troop. So, which had you don't need to know. It's little plastic action figures of Star Trek figures that were very well used and been painted over. And when it took the paint off, they looked like ghouls. So it's not in the story. It's in the. So, what this novel miniseries was an adaptation of the 2004 Blessings Deferred book, the 2008 re-release of the book, and then the later 2019 Amazon release of the book, Grandma's novel, roughly 25, 30 years after the promise in 1990, when I was 19 years old, and promised Grandma Knapp that I would publish her book. She was the only one in the family that had written a book, published a book. My father attempted to write a book. I found some of his manuscript pieces and some technical stuff, but it wasn't usable as a book. Although apparently my sister Martha has decided to tackle that, and with the letters from him. I'm not going to do that. She's also the person that said take the Blessings Deferred thing from 2023 down about a year ago. Found it on there and went like, take it off that channel. It embarrasses me. How could it possibly have embarrassed her? This thing is G-rated. There's nothing embarrassing about it. Star Trek action figures. You do this thing and put this out there. Well, her son Daniel said, put it back up somewhere else. What? Didn't need to take that down. She's in Missouri. So I put it back on the other channel, and then Mark's cards, and I looked at it again. Adam Brown and John Yeager. Looked at it again and said, well, what happened if you, now that it's this season, what happened if you just re-released that story with the Blessings First story, but put title credits like you do now on the beginning and the end, redo the theme song so it's less cheesy, and then re-release it. Put it back on the official Chimera channel as an official lost 6 hours of Starship Chimera. It would have been replete in the end of the second season. It would have been right after. It would have been just after the Fallen Ones. It would have been like a six hours of the show, Fallen Ones. After that, it would have been Blessings Deferred. And there were 3 movies, split up into 6 hours, split up into 3 movies. It was a trilogy. And it's basically the template for what you did with Legacy. So go do that. I redid the song. I did the song correctly. I thought okay, the extra piano accompaniment is goofy in this, and it just sounded off, and it was too loud. And why don't I just do the poem over again, and just do it as a song, but play on the ukulele? Grandma Knapp would have liked playing on the ukulele, so I did. It turned out great. Put it on there, put the titles together. Now I'm rendering the soul up. It's back. It's back as a completely new thing, although it was done 2 years ago. Almost 2 years ago. This December, 2 years ago. So it is a flashback. It's a lost season of Starship locations. Strange Worlds. It's a lost season. It's the Blessing Deferred season. I don't think Roddenberry would have liked it, though, because he doesn't like religion. He was a humanist. But it's fine. It's like an interesting bookend to the Planet of the Fallen Ones, where it's kind of the opposite of that. It would have been an interesting bookend. So it's canon. It's canon. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. And now that my sister is in Missouri, and she's raising chickens on a farm, she probably has a bigger appreciation for the old school story from 100 years ago. Probably wouldn't mind. And even if she does, it's staying up on that other channel. But yeah, she's raising chickens and bees and stuff. And if she gets the chickens drunk, then she'll have a new appreciation for that story as well. There's a story about that. But yeah, they out here, California, in a nutshell, the story, was the novel was written in roughly 1957, and then there was a 73 rewrite in short stories. The reason her last name is not Brown with an E is because she remarried after Noah Brown died. Eugene Brown died. Another Eugene, interestingly. Eugene Brown died, and she remarried, and Carl Knapp of the Midwest was a traveler. He liked to travel around, not like the traveler like Star Trek, but a world traveler. So as a retired senior citizen, you got to go around all the traveling places. In her heyday, she played for the Chautauqua musical circuits, and she was a prodigy on the violin, the piano, probably guitar guitar too, a number of other things. You could play any instrument you put in front of her. Stringed instrument, you play it. Piano was a stringed instrument. You could sing in the choir. So when she moved out to California in 1971, 71, after Carl Lamp had died, she was in the choir at the church, and one of the founders of the Wise Ones, which was a women's group. My mother was also a founder of the Wise Ones, even though she was too young to be in it at that point, but grew into it. My Grandma Knapp was not. Grandma Knapp was 90 at her famous 90th birthday, in which the city of Milpitas decreed that she should be, that should make that a Milpitas Day, Grandma Knapp Day, the 20th of June. There is Bob Brown Day as well, on the 5th of June. But yeah, because he was a mayor of Milpitas. So he was famous as a mayor of Milpitas. She was famous as a local celebrity. There were two people that were going to name that senior center after, Barbara Lee and my grandmother. They ended up naming it Barbara Lee Center, but they probably should have named at least another one after Estelle now, because she was there in the beginning. There should be on Estelle now. But a day is fine. A day of Grandma Knapp Day. but yeah, there's a park. That is a park. That's a 2010 named after her. But she needs something more than a day. Maybe a street. I don't know. But the main thoroughfare outside the Park Victoria, that was already named after Mom way back. So she already has a street named after her. Mom passed away in 2024, a little after this story. So there's precedence to put the story back out and put that out there. As well as, since Martha's doing the emails, like we could, dad mail letters, old ones. We can do Mom's too. But we'd have to do it in such a way that, so what I did is I made Starship Locations Legacy and Transformers Legacy and used ideas from the letters as plot background. So it wasn't actually, you can't pin it down to what I was getting it from. So it's the Transformers Legacy and the Star Trek Legacy were from even to a little bit extent that the newer ones. But not enough to be able to tell where it came from. I think Queen Bee Studios had originally aired this miniseries. That was sort of like the Queen Bee Studios. Yeah. But it went back to being KTS, because the location cast, because that makes more sense. Once Mom was no longer executive producer of the alleged studio, Dan Brown was the alleged studio executive producer, okaying the release of the videos, and why not Grandma's story? Fine. Great Grandma's story, so fine. Miniseries is completely harmless. I realized it in the commentary thing there. This is kind of a remake of the making of that I had likened it to Reading Rainbow and stuff like that, but not Romper Room, oddly enough. But no, it's probably not those two things either. Probably what it's more reminiscent of is those made-for-cable access shows back in the 80s and 90s, where you could go on there and just essentially do an early blog about something. It's a blog. So treat it as a blog when you watch the movie. It's a blog. It's a blog, yeah, but with Star Trek figures as a sort of visual thing to draw you in. Yeah, they're playing the characters, acting out as though they were, because there are no kids in it. They had to just talk about the Freeze children in it, because there are no kids in it. Partly to avoid the Copra Act of the YouTube, which was at the time going after things that weren't actually bad, and not the things that were. But yes, that has since gone down a little bit. So yeah, the whole thing is easily a G-rated. There's nothing. Which, when Grandma Knapp tried to publish short stories back in the day, vanity presses would say, "Oh, it's not shocking or racy enough. It's not shocking. There's nothing going. Nobody's getting killed off or whatever." Actually, there was a chapter where that was not included in the book, one of the short stories, where something did happen. There was one. There was a philandering lady in town that was apparently a charlatan. And she was a rather puzzling character that was in the story. I can see why it wasn't included, because it's obviously some sort of weird 1920s racial thing, and that's probably why it wasn't included. I'm not sure which race she was, but I'm gonna guess maybe a gypsy, yes. Which is, no, we don't want to put that in there. Let's leave that out, because that's not nice to the Ramatis. Like, they didn't deserve that. So that's not in the story, and it's not in the main novel. It was a short story, and it's not in the story. It's not there. There was also, well, the kids were playing cowboys and Indians at one point in one of the stories, and I think I changed some of the wording in the episode to like cowboys and natives or something, just to make it like not say that word, just to be nice and PC about it. I don't think that at that point in Greenville, it was Greenville, Michigan, is where it takes place. And I don't think at that point in that time period, a little over a century ago, that there was any. All the natives are gone. They've been shipped off somewhere else. Very few of them left. And so they didn't even know what they acted like. So the kids are going on about guessing about, and they act more like fur trappers than they act like a white fur trappers. Than they act like Indians, Native Americans. So indigenous people, they don't act like that. It's a little bit off, but they skin a skunk and it stinks them up. So hey, they get the karmic thing. But yes, so there's a that's the form of karmic justice, that Americanized karma. That's the universe gets back at you kind of thing. But that's not the other kind. I know it's not the other kind is incarnation. It's different. There's none of that in there. It's very very quasi Christian, almost Methodist. I think she was a Methodist before she was Presbyterian. That's very similar. Still Protestant. Grandpa Brown, her first husband, was also a Freemason, the Freemason cult. But that might be a little creepy, except that most of the men in that area back then in Chicago were Freemasons. So it was just, you had to go to the lodge. It's more like the Fred Flintstone version of the lodge. They're all at the lodge and they hang out. Something secret. Then it was a secret society of evil bad guys or something. It was just, they go to the lodge. That's what they do. Grandma never drank. The whole family were teetotalers. So yeah, they're one of the stories is mentioned is the drink chickens. There was something called Prohibition back then in the 20s and 30s. It led to the rise of the mobs, basically. The Americans decided no more drinking, which led to a lot more trouble. And the context of that story was that they were all prohibitionists. So at the time. So when my great grandmother accidentally inebriated her chickens with rotten elderberries, that was humiliating to her. But yes, like, oh my no. But yes, also they mentioned voting and suffrage at one point because women did not vote back then. Interestingly, it's very odd. It was a strange, different society. That's over a century ago. An interesting look back over a century ago. And because it is an audiobook with visuals, it's basically an audiobook. It's basically a non-motion comic, go-motion comic. You see the visuals, and the visuals are just thrown out there like kind of like a Bevanfield video, actually. A little bit, yeah. Those Bevanfield cartoons. It's kind of like that. Here's a guy. Here's another guy. It's the same voice every time, because of course it is. Yeah. But yes. Blessings Deferred. There has since been some other people that have used the title, but that's okay. It was a short story in 2024. Wasn't us. It's not us. A little very, very short article. But they probably meant hope deferred, which is the biblical quote from the Isaiah. Yeah, so that's different. Also, interestingly enough, redoing that poem song, the song is kind of more interesting than the other thing I had discussed. Made an earlier version of this, but I'll just go into the song. And you can add this to the end of the making of if you want to, and have people sit through 2.5 hours of making of. But you don't have to. I think this version covers it. There's a book that Grandma wanted to get published, never got around to it. She passed away in 1996. She was just shy of 100. But I did promise to publish the book, and I did eventually publish it in 2004 with help from family members. The book had many poems and other things in there. She took a creative writing class with my mother in the 70s, and she re-updated the short stories so they're a little bit better. Her writing style was very generic and flippant, but if those were children's stories, if she'd rewritten them with illustrations in the 70s, that would have been the thing to do, because that would have been cool. Still have the Grandma Nap children's stories. So this is like watching children's stories. I mean, there's a circus one and another one on Jumbo. Yeah, there's a weird Citizen Kane reference in this. Jumbo the Sled. Because clearly, but this is before that movie came out. But it's not Rosebud. It was called Jumbo. But yes, there's a reference. So yeah, and there's the circus, the elephants, and the kid version of the circus and all that. And you don't get to see any of that, just getting them talking about it. But isn't that like what a blog is anyway? You don't get to see the blog, pieces of blog. But yes, so it's going up. It's back. I'm going to put it on the Chimera channel as the lost season of. This is the lost season of from back in 2023 of Starship Locations. Put it in the thing. It's a lost season. It doesn't mirror anything now except for the fact that our current trilogy of Starship Locations dealing with the LARPing troupe and the Plague Planet. It's the same LARPing troupe. That's the only connection. This is before they allegedly LARPing troupe. Before they went on and did this season, they did this other season almost 2 years ago. And it never got aired, but it got banned. And now it's back. Put in different credits and a better song. So the song, I think the song was really cheesy. Yeah, the song goes the Changed Cross. Or it's the other title is Oh My Heart or something. It's there are other versions of it in the world. It's under an anonymous name at a 1930s church. It goes back to 1870, and it was Estelle Fries. It was Grandma Nap's aunt. She wrote it. That's the origin of that. So if anybody's trying to figure out where the Changed Cross is from, it's Estelle Fries of Greenville, Michigan. That's where it's from. And it was later given to this church, their church there. That church, and then a copy was given by Clarence Fries, my great grandfather, to the church, and then another copy was given to one of their relatives, and also to the hired girl in the story. And the hired girl, the other relative, went to their church, and they handed it out. This is Estelle Fries's, before she was Estelle Brown's thing, when it was in fact her aunt, Estelle Fries, that she's named after. But they didn't know that. So in 1930s, it says one of them says Estelle Fries wrote it. One of them credits the Smith character as written it. No, it was not Kate Smith. No, but Grandma Nap did open for Kate Smith. She did not give her this song. She opened for Kate Smith, or God Bless America. Kate Smith, of course, wrote that. But she opened for hers. I don't know what she played at the Chautauqua Circuits that evening, but it was a violin, I believe, according to the records, 100 years ago. And so yeah, so I played that during the Roaring Twenties. The Roaring Twenties. We're now in the Roaring Twenties again. So So yeah, that's kind of fun. But that was different. It's different Smith. In fact, the name might have been changed. Grandma might have changed the name in the book to not affect it. That's the only way the mom letters could come out too, is change the names. But I don't think they will, just because that doesn't really work. What do you do with like mail correspondent letters? Sure, thousands of them, but she was writing the most. That's on the mayor. That'd be the mayor's side. That'd be the mayor and Leone's side. That'd be different. That'd be the Italians. Or think what to do with that later. Some other date that was mentioned in the making of. I don't know why it went on so long about that. But the song, back to the song, was like change cross, and doing the song originally. I had done the song kind of like a hymn to the tune of some classic hymns. Discovered that there's, as I was rehearsing to do it over, I was like, it's probably not this. It's probably not, doesn't sound like this one hymn. It actually sounds like another one that's similar. I said, do that instead as the melody, because there's no melody in the poem. It was a poem, and that one sounded better. So I did it. I did it with this other one. So it's less as the deer and more the rugged cross. It's less into the garden and more rugged cross. So it's more of that. I didn't take it exactly, but it had to have a melody that was hymn-like. There, so it works. You get to hear a song from the 1870s performed for the beginning of this story. So. Yeah, that was later released in the 1930s, about 90 years ago, under an anonymous name from the hired girl. The other hired girl. It was speculated, moved to Grand Rapids and then to Jenison and then that area in Michigan. The other one, my name was a Krieger. And then when my niece, Lisa, my oldest niece, Lisa, moved out to Michigan, they married to the Krieger family. They're not cousins, don't have to worry. She was the other hired girl. The grandmother on that side is the other hired girl. No relation. You didn't marry your cousin, don't worry. Anyway, so yeah. Just so happens to be the Krieger. How common is that name? Oh, but yes, that was one of the interesting connections of that area. She went back to Michigan. She put on a Michigan accent and lived there for 30 years, but the Michigan accent, but she's from California. anyway, yeah. But yeah, so there's quite a few of them back there. Other ones went back there, Ragsdale as well. But that doesn't matter in the story because none of them are actually in the novel. They haven't been born yet. None of us are born yet in the novel. The novel covers roughly 1876 to, well, 1870 for the song, 1876 to 1933, roughly. About when the song was published at the other church. 1933. 1934. It doesn't go any further than that. So right between... it jumps over World War One. Doesn't really cover it. It jumps to 33. Doesn't go over any history, nothing there either. And this story is structured very much like the later episode of Star Trek Meeting the Brady Bunch. Very, very much so, like that. Also another talky rom-com kind of thing. More like a rom-com than this is. This is a children's book, basically. If it was marketed as that, it would have worked. Yeah, but it's, I'm going to say that the video isn't for kids just to avoid copra, but there's really nothing bad in it at all. It's perfectly fine. It's not even scary in any way. It's fine. And yes, also, were there any updates as to all the scammers that the old original publisher gave just gave away the name rights to anybody to a bot farm? Yes, they still call to this day. They're random bot farms call from other foreign countries and go like, we want to market your book. It's like, who are you? It sounds like you're from Russia or something. I don't answer any of those guys because they're all like, ew. One time I did answer and I said, how did you even get this number? I even know who I am. They hung up. But yeah, the book wasn't. It went out of print 2008. There was also another funny thing on the way out of the Martha part of the family, sister's family moving away. Before they moved out, 6 months after that, out of Grandma's house. Grandma's house is now gone, and someone else owns it down the street. After all those years, for some reason she got a wild hair and decided those 8 books that remained, she'd give them to family members. Just get rid of them, family members, along with all the other stuff from the pack ratting, Brown family keeps and stuff. Most of the other stuff went away. Yes, all the other stuff. But I said, okay, which family members want a copy of the book? And turns out I asked each of the family members that were current, that would even be remotely interested. Turns out only one of them wanted one. Only one, just one. And but you could put it out, and the only other person that was vaguely interested was Dan, the nephew, Martha's son, eldest, and he goes, "Well, I already have a copy of it. Why would I want another one? I've already seen it." What else? Yeah, and he said he put it on Kindle. It's like they can just go on Kindle and look it up. They can just read it there. Yeah, for nothing. Well, it's not for nothing. It's $4 or something. At least I put it on Kindle. Just let him read it there. Give him a link. That's the way it's done now. I don't need to do anything with that. It's fine. It's not making any money on it. Yeah, they obviously didn't want to buy. They put it up there. They didn't want to buy. Some of my other stuff kind of sold. Only some of it. Sometimes there's a trickle from the science fiction books. But not from Grandma's novel. No, the other book that we put out was Canary Space, Distant Destinies. But yeah, that one didn't go over too well either. I've written, now it's 42 books on the Amazon Kindle. Yeah, so Reader's Digest, that didn't work. Because there were probably a lot of other people that did certain things. This book series is a niche. It's a niche for time and clarity and stuff like that. Now that it's a story about over a century ago, it's interesting as a historical look back on something in history. And yeah, I mentioned in the other version that there were a bunch of things that were cut out, including the hook, which was made up, but to get to read the story, but because it wasn't really meant to be a story of like a, you know, it was a series of pictures and views and stuff, a series of vignettes, and it didn't really have cohesive narrative except that we're writing about kind of like On Location, the Calcat, my life story stuff. Well, that actually had a narrative though. That was a little more. The high school days and the college days were structured. They had a narrative. There was something going on. The high school ones were about basically recess, during a recess, and before or after, or the college ones were about what happened in between classes in college, and the church ones, what happened at the church ones, but not during counseling session, that kind of thing. And the other ones, not actually what's going on in the sermon, but what's going on before and after the sermon, and all other On Locations. Currently, we're living in On Location missions, but that ends up being blogs as well. So, there's some commenters have said, well, you don't have. It's a little rambly. So if you've done thousands of videos of this already, it's going to be rambly, and why not? Because, sure, I could do TikTok videos. I don't want to. I could do short videos where one thing happens and it's over. I don't want to do that. I feel like I need to explain a setup instead of just a payoff. Well, it's a setup. Payoff. A lot of these stories are like that, setup and payoff. Graham Knapp didn't do transitions to the setup, so a lot of the transitions were not there and had to kind of be pulled in. Now, this transition needs to be in here. The chickens one, for instance. The bee one, for instance. But in that one, she had a setup for the bee one. She said, okay, the setup was Clarence wants to be a beekeeper. That was the setup. All right. The setup for the chickens one should have been Grandma. Her mother was a teetotaler. Great grandma was a teetotaler. She didn't drink. Hence, this is going to happen. The chickens are going to get there's your setup. You gotta have a setup to have an ending. The circus one kind of has a setup. The circus is coming to town, and we want to see it. So let's set up our chairs where we can see it really well. There you go. There's your setup. And it's all fun Midwestern stuff, upper Midwestern stuff. Yeah, I don't think they intended to have any social or racial context at all. I think they were just trying to be like living up there and whatever, I don't think they would. They don't like them outsider city slickers. I encountered when we visited Greenville in 2006. That gas station attendant lady didn't want to see us California city slickers there. That was bizarre. But Grandma Knapp described that town so well that I knew my way around, which was weird. Literally 7,000 people there. And it was also mentioned in the review that Milpitas is 10 times that, 70,000. And it's kind of funny. They knew my way around. Turn over at that light. Go to the left and down the street, down this is Henderson and the other street and the other street. Turn right, there's the house. They're all, Adam, how do you know where this place is? Grandma Knapp described it. It's the same street, they haven't changed it.